Welcome back to episode 57 of Blurred Summits. Today we are going to be talking about self-awareness. We're going to talk about what self-awareness is, the two types of self-awareness, and then different ways and strategies that you can use to leverage self-awareness and increase it in yourself.
So what is self-awareness here, Abdul?
So self-awareness at its base definition is pretty much being aware of what reality actually is.
Okay.
Right? So, most of the time we have perceptions of what reality is. We think things are a certain way. We think, oh, I'm a very courageous person, but in reality, I'm a coward, right? Or I'm a very smart person. In reality, I'm a dummy, right? So these different things and these misconceptions of our reality are very commonplace. And self-awareness is pretty much trying to figure out what the truth is.
So self-awareness is you actually knowing what's going on and not being caught up in your own head or what other people might think and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah. Or even just, you know who you are, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but you're also able to receive reality from the outside and it doesn't destroy you. Like sometimes.
Or you receive reality in the way that it actually is, like you're perceiving it correctly.
You're perceiving it correctly. Yeah, everything like that. So, end of the day, self-awareness is actually something that we want to have, right?
Yeah.
We want to be as self-aware as possible. Why, you might ask? Well, self-awareness is linked with things like confidence, creativity. It lets you build better relationships. You're also less likely to lie and to cheat and to steal. So there's a bunch of different benefits for self-awareness. The positives are endless.
Yeah, well, I think you can see those who are self-aware do seem to be the ones who are successful, right? Like you look at comedians, you look at any sort of performer, the best ones are those that are self-aware. They can actually take in things, take in criticism and move on from that, right? I think that's an important thing to have, or trait to have in a person. Because if not, how are you going to be able to accept criticism and move on from that, right?
Yeah. So there are two big types of self-awareness, right? The first big type of self-awareness is internal self-awareness. Internal self-awareness is, are you able to perceive reality, your reality, in truth? So do you know who you actually are? What are your value systems? What are your goals? What are your aims? What are your beliefs, right? This is internal self-awareness, when you are dead solid on who you are as an individual, right? The second type of self-awareness is external self-awareness. So external self-awareness is, are you aware of how other people perceive your reality, right? Are you aware of what other people think about you? And is this the truth?
So it's how basically are you able to perceive how others think, how others' reality is, right? External is how other reality, right?
External is
others' reality of you as a person.
Others' reality of you, exactly, right? And seeing that in truth and not in some falsehood or some,
What's tough to see other people's perception of a person, right? Like if you can start to figure that out, you can take that really well, right?
It's really like empathy almost. You can kind of think of external self-awareness as very closely linked.
Really?
Yeah, well, empathy, people who have high external self-awareness have high empathy. The reason being is that if you have high external self-awareness, you can understand the perspectives of others, right? You can see where people are coming from. You can relate with them more. You have this connection with people that is stronger. So it's easier for you to build relationships. It's easier for you to be empathetic with the situations that people are going through.
I would have always thought that I thought I would be low external self-awareness. But the way you described it, I'm like, maybe I actually do have high external self-awareness.
Yeah,
because I thought it was when I do that, it's basically the thoughts of others, but it's not really. Well, it's thoughts to a certain extent, I guess. There's parts of it that I can interpret good, and there's other parts where I can't. So I don't know how that stuff works, but.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I feel like sometimes I'm way off the dot. Sometimes I'm way on, I'm right on the mark.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's
Yeah.
the weird thing. It's like it almost exists on a spectrum, and it seems like our self-awareness fluctuates, right?
Hmm.
Between high and low internal, high and low external. Yeah, I think it's very tough to always be high self-awareness. That's
Well,
a
I think, yeah,
very
but the way that you put it, where it's
trained
like with
skill.
empathy, then I think then lots of people would have a high external self-awareness, but it's the really subtle things. Like I've always thought empathy is a super obvious thing to pick up on. Seeing like the emotions of others is understandable, but it's like the little subtleties is what I've always had issues with.
So give me an example.
Sorry?
Give me an example of that.
Well, and like, actually, that's a good point. Well, in situations, like if there's some stuff going on, usually I can kind of tell if people are kind of like stuff about what's going on. They feel out of place, feel awkward. But then it's like if you're like in a conversation with someone, like in a situational thing, if I'm not talking to someone, I can usually pick up on what they're feeling better than if I'm actually talking to them face to face for some reason. Like it's like when I'm talking to them, I kind of get caught up in, I guess, the talking, so I don't pick up on the little
Okay, wait.
subtleties about the
Okay, so do you
person.
have an example of a time where your external self-awareness was like way off the dot?
Not off the top of my head, but it's happened a bunch of times. I can't bring up an example though, but I know that happens a lot for me. But at least in the conversation, like if I'm sitting back and kind of like watching, or like in a group and I'm not the one talking, then I can pick up on a lot of that stuff. But if it's me, if I'm talking,
That's
I
so
can't do it.
interesting. That is so interesting that you said that, because that is one of our pro tips that we're going to be talking about later. Stay tuned. Okay, that
Really?
is really interesting. Yeah. Because, you know, with self-awareness, we oftentimes need to step back, right? You
Yeah.
don't you don't get self-awareness by engaging all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're engaging, kind of like what you just said, when you're engaging, it's harder to pick it up while you're engaging. But when you're
Yeah.
stepping back, when you're kind of just observing, when you're seeing what's going on, then it's so much
It's
easier to be
crystal
like,
clear.
right, that is interesting. Oh yeah. So
Funny thing
we're
is, I
gonna
didn't
talk.
even realize that was one of the lower ones. That was just just happened to come
Yeah.
out.
So there's four kinds of people, right?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about four really broad archetypes, right? Of individual sort of categories of self-awareness that we can talk about, right? So the first kind of person is the introspector. So the introspector is somebody who has really high internal self-awareness, but really low external self-awareness. So what does an introspector look like? An introspector is basically somebody who knows who they are. They know who they
Mm-hmm.
are, they know their values, they know everything about themselves. But they find it very hard to take in the perspectives of others.
Okay. So
Usually
yeah, they're
they're
really good
very
with understanding
stubborn.
themselves. Yeah. But they're
Exactly,
not really
right?
good at understanding others or how they
Yeah.
perceive you or what they think.
And
Yeah.
sometimes that's useful. Like you'll find it in a lot of like really high achieving people who know exactly where they want to go. They're driven to get that very thing, but then they they don't listen to what anyone else says. They don't
Yeah, they're not really
understand
a
the
team
perspective of anyone
player.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they find like these introspector people, it's harder to build relationships with these people, right?
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah. So, if you're trying to make friends, then
You need
maybe
to
you
be
don't want to be this kind of person. Yeah, you need to understand people, right?
extrospective.
Extrospective. Yeah, something like that.
I don't
Anyways,
know if that's a word, but I think that makes sense.
the second
Introspect,
kind of
extrospect.
person is the pleaser. So the pleaser is the opposite of the introspector. They have really low internal self-awareness, but really high external self-awareness. So the pleaser is the kind of person who doesn't know who they are. They don't really
Mm-hmm.
know what they stand for. They don't really have much that they stand for, but then they know what other people want of them,
So they
right? They know
basically
what
base
other people
themselves
want.
off of what other people want them to do rather than do things off
Exactly.
what they want to do.
Exactly. And so the common term for this is the people pleaser,
Which
right?
makes sense, which is why, because they don't
Why
really
it's
care
called a
about them.
pleaser.
It's about other people.
Yeah. Yeah,
So they
yeah,
don't really know
exactly.
where they want to go right to the case. So if I don't know where I want to go, might as well help where other people think I want to
And the issue with this kind of a person is that you end up getting walked all over.
Yeah.
Right?
You get
Because
taken
you have no
advantage
sense
of.
of self. You don't really stand for anything. If you don't stand for anything, how can you expect other people to respect you?
Mm-hmm.
You don't stand for anything, right? It just
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
So are
It's
they
a very
easier
tough
to
one.
make friends with and relationships with because they're like that?
Yeah, but then you also have to begin to question, are the relationships that you're building
Are they good
good
ones?
relationships? That's the
So
tough
that's where you can
question,
get the
right?
really one-sided relationships, right?
You have very one-sided relationships. They can grow to be toxic relationships. I think possibly the evolution of people now, I'm just kind of making this up right now, is that when we're young, we're uh, initially we start off not knowing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Then we become pleasers. Then we become introspectors. Then we become self-aware. I feel like that's the progression. At least I feel like this is possibly the progression in my own life, where we start off pleasing the people, then we hit
Mm-hmm.
a breaking point, become the exact opposite.
So you say, screw the people, I want myself.
You say, screw the people, I want myself. And then you become very driven. I feel like we see a lot of this in people our age, where in high school, they're people pleasers. They go into university, now they're very driven. They're focused on their goals, they're focused on their ambitions, and they block out the rest of the world. Then they
Yeah.
do that for a couple of years, realize, okay, wait, this isn't a single player game. If I want to have a good time, I can't. It's more fun to play with other people, right? So
Yeah.
then you become
Yeah.
self-aware.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah. So what are the other two then? Because you only got you
So
hit the first two
right.
now.
So the other two is the seeker. So the seeker is somebody who has really low internal self-awareness and really low external self-awareness.
Is this
So the
common in
seeker,
people?
it could be. I'm not exactly sure of the breakdown of like who is what and where, and I think that's a very subjective thing. It's kind of hard to determine it, right?
Yeah, you
But
can't really
a
get the data
seeker,
on that.
right? The seeker is somebody who doesn't know who they are. They don't know what they want. They can't connect with anyone. They perceive reality incorrectly, both from themselves and from the way that other people see it. This person's pooched. They're done.
That is Abdul's favorite term.
Yeah.
Pooched. Define
So
pooched.
pooched, right? Like you're pooched. Like
Define it. That you can't use the word. You can't say pooched is pooched. Define
you're
pooched.
just like that. Like you ain't got nothing left. You're right.
I love how you have no idea what this term
You're
means. You
squeezing
just
the
use it.
airbag. You're squeezing the airbag, and there's no more air left in there. Like
The way
you're
you say
breathing.
it is you're
Your
screwed.
lungs
You're
are
screwed.
empty.
You're
You're
screwed.
screwed. Yeah.
I can't believe you never really. You just use it and didn't know
Pooched
how.
is a better term.
It's the same thing. It's basically saying you're out of luck.
You're out of luck.
You're done
You
for.
are out
Those
of
are all
luck.
synonyms for the
You're
same
done
thing.
for. I like that one better.
Those
Yeah,
are all the
you're
same
done
ones,
for.
but I like you're just using it. Yeah, that might be what it means. Why not? Just run with it, right?
And then the fourth kind of person is the aware person.
So the one who's
The
actually
person,
self-aware.
exactly. This is the person that we are striving all to become. Person who has high internal self-awareness, high external self-awareness. And this person, they know who they are, right? So they have a
Mm-hmm.
very good sense of who they are, what they want, their values, their goals, their ambitions, their drive in life, their purpose in life. But despite knowing exactly who they are, they don't reject and criticize the external world,
Yeah, they can
right?
take
They're
support from
able,
others.
exactly. They're able to take support from others. They're able to, even if another person's perspective goes against their own, they're able to take that in and consider it.
Yeah.
Consider it seriously, even if they end up, denying it or end up not, implementing it. They're able to take that opinion in. They're able to take that perspective in, and they're all the better
Mm-hmm.
for it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And after going through that progression you talked about does make sense. Where you start off as the seeker, and then you work through introspector, pleasers, and then self-aware. That type of progression does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, at least that's kind of the progression that
It seems
I've
logical,
seen.
at least.
in
It
myself
seems
and possibly
illogical to go
people
any
around
other
me.
way.
Right. And, I think we fluctuate a lot, right? I think maybe we have a month where we are in that aware, but then we fall back. We fall back and become introspectors or seekers or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so it's a very tough process. And that, my friend, that is why we are going to give you guys some tips about how to improve your self-awareness so that we can at least try to be in that aware phase as much as possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is it? Tip number 1, avoid experience and power. A lot of things in life are improved with experience, right? If you have more experiences, you're better equipped to deal with things. With self-awareness, sometimes it's the opposite. With self-awareness, sometimes it's the opposite. I'll tell you why. If we have too many experiences, then we begin to state like, okay, I think I know exactly what reality is. I think I know exactly what the truth is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Reality.
That does make sense.
Right?
Yeah.
And so although this might give you a very good sense of purpose and really high internal self-awareness, you cannot get that external self-awareness with experience.
Yeah.
Right? You need to step back. And the same thing goes with power. Why do you say like avoid power? Because the more power that you get, right? That might be in a company where you're a higher position. That might be when people listen to what you just say. The more power that you get, it's harder to be self-aware because your ego begins to grow. And it's very hard to take that step back and see reality for its truth when your ego is so blown out of proportion.
Well, yeah, it's because you're not able to take in what other people are thinking, right? Or what they're saying, I guess.
Yeah.
You can know what you want to do, but
I have a feeling that Kim Jong-un has pretty low self-awareness, because he has so much power.
I think that's a pretty easy one to state that.
Yeah.
I mean, we personally don't know him. But...
We don't know him. Little Kim? Sorry, Big Kim. I'm sorry. Big Kim.
Well, maybe, yeah, who knows? Maybe the news is what's making a change. But you're on a first name basis.
With Kim?
With the
Kimmy?
Supreme Leader.
Supreme Leader? It's no big deal, just a day in the light. Anyways.
Call you what's his
Number
name?
2.
Who's the NBA player?
LeBron?
Who's with him?
Kobe.
No.
Michael.
Crazy hair.
Crazy hair?
He's buddies with Kim Jong-un.
What?
He played on the Bulls with Jordan and Pippen.
Oh, you're talking about the rebounder. What was his name? I know exactly who you're talking about.
That's who it is, though. He is good friends with Kim Jong-un. Straight up, he'd go travel to North Korea and just play ball and hang out with him. He's a crazy guy, man.
Know that. That's funny.
Straight up, yeah. Annoyingly, I can't remember his name, but oh well.
Tip number 2 is avoid why questions and ask what questions. So,
what would that look like?
I will tell you what that looks like. Introspection is a big part of self-awareness, right? We think, okay, if I want to be self-aware, I need to sit down and I need to look at reality, right? I need to, like kind of said, I need to take a step back. When you take a step back, what do we usually say? So usually when we take a step back, we say things like, why do I feel this way? Why is it like this? Why? And we ask ourselves these why questions. But why questions aren't the types of questions that you want to ask. Said you want to ask what questions. So I'll give you an example.
Would it be like, what made me feel this way?
Exactly. Instead of saying, why do I feel this way? Think about, okay, like what circumstances made me feel
this way? So you
talk
about the factors. You're trying to figure out the factors that impact you.
You're trying to figure out the factors. And the reason that you want to say the why questions the what questions instead of the why questions is because the what questions are better perceptions of what reality actually is. You're looking at the facts. You're looking at the objective facts, right?
Yeah. So is it that's because why
can be pulled and twisted and turned and emotions involved and reality is twisted and all this kind of stuff.
What questions make it objective, whereas why questions make it subjective?
Exactly. So some really great what questions, like you said, what circumstances led me here? What what patterns exist in my life. If I'm always feeling a certain way after a certain type of circumstance, is there a pattern to these events? Right? Is there a pattern to these different things? So ask those what questions instead of the why questions, for sure. The next tip on how to improve your self-awareness is to get a coach. So, you know, I'm using coach as a very strong term here. Basically, get somebody in your life, get somebody in your life who spends a lot of time with you, right? Who spends enough time with you that they see you in your natural environment, right? They see you interact with the world. They see you interact with other friends. They see you interact with family. They see you in all of these different circumstances. They see you at school, right? And this person needs to be somebody who doesn't just see you, but is willing to tell you what reality actually is. It's very hard, you know, it's very hard for us to be self-aware. It's very hard for us to be self-aware when we're in the moment, like you mentioned. It's very hard for us to be self-aware in the moment. So if we have that external person who we tell, okay, you know, like, watch me for the next week. We'll meet up at the end of each week and tell me what you saw me do. And so, you know, throughout the week, they'll just pay attention. They'll, you know, maybe write down in their phone, oh, he said this, she said this, they did this, whatever. At the end of the week, you sit down with them, and what you do is you tell them, okay, tell me. So they sit down and they tell you all of the things that you did that were incorrect and the things that you did that were good. Right? Both in terms of your own values, in terms of how you interact with other people, and so on and so forth. And when you're having this weekly meeting with your coach, you don't talk back to them. You don't criticize anything they're saying. You know, even though you want to be like, well, no, I didn't mean it to be that way. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't, right? That's not your problem. It doesn't matter what you meant. It doesn't matter what you think, because clearly the external reality is different than what you think.
The perception is different.
So, you know, that's the whole point about like getting a coach, and then just have these weekly meetings and just have them. That way you can get a real easy pass to objective reality. Right. The next tip that we have is to listen more. And this is exactly what you said, right? At the start of the episode, it's that you find your self-awareness to be very high when you sort of take a step back and observe, but very low when you're in the moment, right? And that's true for a lot of people. That's true for a ton of people. And the reason is that when we're talking, we are putting things out. We're attacking, right? Attacking the world, attacking what's in front of us. Not literally attacking, but, you know, attacking in the sense that you're on the offensive when you're talking, versus when you're just listening, you're able to bird's eye view it. You're able to step back and sort of see what's up, see what's happening.
I think that's pretty interesting, right? Like it makes sense, because when you're in the moment, there's so much more going on in your head. But when you take that step back, it kind of all clears out, and it's just you being able to watch what's going on.
Right. And then we have learn about the hindrances, right? There are things that hinder our self-awareness. The real big ones are the cognitive biases. We did an episode about this. You guys should go back and listen to the episode that we spoke about cognitive biases, because it's pretty helpful to sort of know these things that are tugging our mind one way or the other without us really knowing. And they're subconscious, which is really interesting, right? So other hindrances is a lack of mindfulness, lack of doing these tips. And what you really want to do is, before you take sort of the steps to self-awareness, eliminate the hindrances to it. Right? Recognize those cognitive biases, get rid of that, right? Get rid of how much you love to speak before you start to ask those introspective questions, that kind of stuff. That doesn't quite logical, right? It's because everyone doesn't realize those biases that they have within them.
And then when they kind of can take a step back and say, oh, I have these biases, they can then be more self-aware and like the introspective, is that what it was? Like in themselves, within themselves, right? Because that's where that kind of blocks you, is when you're looking in with yourself, you have all these biases that you don't realize. So when you kind of chop those out, it's like, oh, it's kind of leaning towards that way because of this little internal bias I have. Maybe it's a little different. You can start to understand why you're thinking the way that you are.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And then last but certainly not least is understand the point of self-awareness.
So what is the point of self-awareness? Let's hear it.
The point of self-awareness is to lead you to self-acceptance, right? That's the entire point.
Yeah.
Self-awareness on its own is not particularly useful. It's useful when it leads you to self-acceptance. Self-acceptance is where all the sauce is. So if you're just hyper self-aware, you know exactly what's going on about yourself, about your reality, about everything that's happening around you. You know it all.
Yeah.
But you don't actually accept yourself for who you are. You don't accept your values for who you are. You don't accept your belief systems for who they are, and you don't accept your goals for what they are. Then it's useless. It's useless. This entire process there's no point, right? Self-acceptance is really the thing that you want to, and self-acceptance, that's where the confidence lies. That's where the increased performance lies and the creativity lies, right? That's where the friendships lie and the relationships lie and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, self-awareness is just a stepping stone towards success in another way, right? Being able to take criticism and improve on yourself to then be able to move towards whatever your end goals happen to be.
Absolutely. 100%. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Blurred Summits. Today we spoke about self-awareness. If you guys found any information here useful, think about one friend who might benefit from that information, and be sure to share this podcast with them. You guys can listen to the full audio podcast on all platforms. The full video podcast is out on YouTube, and be sure to follow us on Instagram for more content. Thank you.